on rakhiba সকলবে
Thank you.
Camera on rakha. Okay.
So today is technically we will cover the fourth component of your unit 1, and we still will talk on Monday. In Monday we will do a general revision of all the 4 components of unit 1 merged into one. So one talk on each component of unit 1 followed by one entire revision kind of a summary lecture on all the 4 components. And we had already mentioned yesterday that today's topic of discussion would be the need and importance of digital humanities, and in what kinds of places one could place digital humanities. By now, everybody has started understanding that it's not just because I am passionate and over enthusiastic about digital humanities. Digital humanities has many ways in which our work can become easy. I will talk by giving some easy examples, but then I will move on to give you some slightly more complicated but extremely interesting examples. One of the common examples which is easy, which technically all of you probably already know, is to cite an example from, okay, I will first give you the example and see if you know, if you can name it. Previously, it was constantly being mentioned, even we were talking about it in class, that whatever we upload up on the internet, it should be readable by the computer. So for instance, just creating a PDF of a book is not enough. One is technically supposed to either type down the entire contents and do proper markup in HTML or whichever application we are using, and then put it up on the internet, because the computer needs to read in its own language so as to be able to deliver back to us whatever we are trying to ask from it, because the standard IQ of a normal computer is 0. All these things we have already discussed. Now, what happens if we do not have machine readable written content? What happens if our work is actually based on images? What happens if image is the category we are working on? Can you think of any ready examples which has recently happened in the last 2 years in which the computer has started reading images also? Can anybody think of an example?
OCM?
Yes, OCM, of course, but then it's still optical character. I'm talking of real images. There's nothing written. It's an entire image of, let's say, a plant which you do not know the name of. So you can click a picture of that plant and then you can still search it. The computer will search it for you and tell you the name of the plant. Even images have now become computer readable. Any common example that you can think of?
Google Lens?
Absolutely. As always, Devashish has again given the correct answer. Google Lens, what Google Lens has done is not, Google anyway is one of the monopolistic companies which is working on digital platforms. So it's not a surprise that Google has done it. And I'm not even trying to say what Google has done is a great thing. I would actually be happier if individual student enterprises did what Google already did. But you see, the possibility has been raised. Now, till today we were talking about, till yesterday's lecture, we were talking of how to make content machine readable. And therefore, if there is an image, if there is a PDF, technically one has to convert it to written content so that computer can read through characters. And as Devashish also points out, OCM is an absolutely fantastic way of doing it. But even that seems to be a thing of the past now. The way digital programs are advancing and are taking things off from last to next. Today, even images are readable. So for instance, there is a cat in front of you and you want to know what breed of cat that is. You simply have to take a photograph in your camera phone and you have to put it on Google Lens and figure out what breed the cat is. That's not enough. It does more than that. It has the capacity of combining images along with texts. So for instance, Google Lens comes with, it is already embedded with Google Translator. What is the benefit of having a translator within an image? Guesses, answers? Why is it important to already have an embedded translator inside a lens where you're supposed to figure out about images? See, supposing any of you travel for a seminar or for whatever purpose to, say, a country like South Korea, Japan, and on entering or landing into the airport, you see all the signage in the airport is written in either the Japanese language or the Korean language or whatever, a language we have no clue about. Or let's say it's written in Mandarin and we have no clue what it means. And then a woman enters straight into a gent's toilet, or maybe a gentleman ends into a woman's toilet, it's going to end up in a disaster. For instance, if you're supposed to go to the customs line, you go to the domestic arrival line, you do a mess of things. How are you supposed to figure out what the language means? Since images are also machine readable, Google has also inserted this kind of a Google Translator. Google Translator already previously existed. It's not as if Google Translator in itself is a new thing. Google Translator exists from many, many years. But embedding it within a part of Google Lens, you can now click the picture of the signage which is on top, written in an absolutely different language. Then you can open your Google Lens. You can use later to read within the image which the lens will read. And eventually you can see in your own language, whatever language you think you know, probably it's a domestic departure. So if you are going for an arrival, you are not supposed to be in this line, you are supposed to be in a different line. So when we talk about the need of digital humanities, we cannot even begin by understanding what is not a need, because everything is a digital need now. If there is a cyber crime, locating it through cyber IP is a digital need. If there is a language we don't understand, if there is an image we can't see, we can do it digitally. Now talk about different kinds of digital maps. With different kinds of digital maps, it's almost impossible now to get lost, provided of course the roads are properly mapped. Now this also happens that because India is not so digitally adept, I personally have been on different kinds of travels and tours into hilly village interiors where Google Map does not work, or any other digital map does not work. But that's a different problem. That problem is because the proper satellite imaging of the roads have not yet happened. But the possibility of digitization helping our lives in making it easier is immense. It is so immense that it is actually infinite. So these are what Google has done as part of their Google suite is so monopolistic and is so like a cartel, like a money-making business, that everyone already knows about it. But what happens to the other open source initiatives which are doing fantastic works and which actually students should get a hang of in order to do their own digital projects? I will try and talk about a few projects of that sort now. Google is always there, but to give money to who's already rich is not quite the impact. There was this famous Hindi song, Jo tere khatir tarpe pehle se hi kya use tarpana. It's something like that. If somebody is already rich, there's really no digital point about making the person richer. If somebody is already anxious, there's no point in making the person more anxious. If somebody is already in love, there's no point in making the person fall more in love with you. Okay, there is a weather catastrophe at my place now. I might get disconnected any moment. Can you hear that there's a huge thunder lightning happening behind me? I'm sorry, I so hope that this lasts till 12 and the talk goes on. I will now mention about this thing called, okay, I will also write it in chat. So I will hope you can take it down and refer to things later. Has anybody heard about Ballotpedia? Whatever I'm mentioning now is all in open source and is done by individual voluntary initiatives. These are monopolistic money-making cartels anymore, like the sort that Microsoft and Google does. I'm trying to talk about the more interesting things which people have done on their own voluntary initiatives. Has anybody heard about Ballotpedia? Or can you make any idea of what Ballotpedia might be from the name? This is also something like Wikipedia, but this is not. Yeah.
Maybe I'm guessing that maybe it is related with votes or elections.
Absolutely. Once again, your guess is correct, which is what I keep saying. It's always important to ask the right questions because students already know the answer. If you ask a question in a right manner, there is no way a student can go wrong. Just give me a second. I'm so sorry, this will now keep happening. Okay, Ballotpedia, of course, is to do about politics. It is an interactive, non-partisan almanac of the US politics. So some Americans themselves have taken this initiative to put this up on open source. They have created this application called Ballot Media, in which it's not necessarily political party based. You understand the meaning of non-partisan, that it does not relate directly to any party, but it refers to a general forum in which people actually try and cast their votes and see, the exit poll happens, the opinion poll happens, and it happens in open source. So actually everybody's doing it. So in our country, typically what happens about an opinion poll? What happens about an exit poll? Typically there is a voting agency, or there is some kind of a research agency which is given the work by some media professional or some media firm who say, so KPMG is a very famous research organization. Likewise, maybe the ABP group or the Aaj group or the NDTV group will give the project of doing the opinion poll or exit poll on some organization which typically does research. Now, this organization will then go and ask people about their opinions before the election, after the polls, which is generally how opinion polls and exit polls happen. Now, how does this work? This also happens on this policy of exclusivity, right? One thing is that whoever's conducting the research actually does not go and talk to everybody around. All of you are of the voting age. How many times has actually a research company asked you about your opinion? Is there any instance in which, in the last Assam election, some research companies actually come and asked you on what you think, what your opinion is, or what your exit poll might be? So there is a way in which these companies do an aggregate research, do a sample survey, which does not necessarily involve every individual who is a real voter. Sample surveys happen differently. But for an open source software in which everybody can talk, everybody can participate, opinion polls and exit polls will become way more easier because of the collaborative participation. I think it's a very interesting thing to happen with election. And election, of course, is always a major point of debate in any part of the world. So the next thing is, I'm giving random examples. The choice that I have made is not based on a proper or a certain linear rationale. It's more random. Can anybody guess what Catpedia would be based on? Some of you might be interested in this. What could be Catpedia? Okay, hint is it is not related to cats. So take that option out. Catpedia is a platform for collectors of comic strips, board games, model cars, other kinds of memorabilia. Is there anybody in this class who is frantic about, collecting Tintin comics or any Tintin memorabilia, or some debate keeps happening between Marvel universe and DC universe? So whoever is a DC fan will go around collecting all kinds of DC memorabilia. Whoever is a Marvel fan, is there anybody in this class who's fond of collecting comic strips and graphic novels and board games and different kinds of memorabilia of the metaverse, of the parallel universe? Which also reminds me, is there any famous cartoon strip which is original to Assam? Is there any famous Assamese comic character or comic strip? So for instance, I know in Bangla that there are certain characters which are Bengali characters which exist in comic, and children read them, even young adolescents read them. Is there anything specific in Assam? There are two ways of looking at it. If there is, you can start digitizing it. And from the Department of Assamese, Tejpur University, after learning enough about digital humanities, this is a great, I think it's a very exciting project of archiving. At your age, if you're interested in a certain kind of a narrative fiction pattern based on graphic novels, comic strips, and if there isn't, you can create one. Oh my goodness, electricity is back. That is such a great thing. If there is no already existing, you have to first tell me if there is some Assamese graphic character or cartoon character. Do you know? Is there anything like that?
Yes, ma'am. Rongmon and Tinkol.
Okay. So apparently there are. So is the whole thing digitized already? Can you get it available digitally? Is it available on the internet?
No, ma'am.
Then this is an exciting project you can start with. First of all, you can start digitizing the pages. After digitizing the pages, you can start marking them in the way the computer understands it. And then you can open it up in open source. And Tezpur University can have it hosted in their own university website as a leading microsite. So it is an entirely different website, but the link of this website will also exist in the central website of Tezpur University. And then when you market it around, it will go in the name of the Department of Assamese Tezpur University. It's a fantastic thing you could think of doing. The other thing you could think of doing is, in addition to archiving and digitizing and marking whatever you are doing, if you can create your own comic strip. Is there an artist in this class? Because later on, you probably will also have to do a project which involves digital humanities. Let me see. Yes, Unit 4 has a project which uses techniques of digital humanities, which will be undertaken by the students. So is there any artist in this class? Somebody who really draws well? I need at least 2 volunteers, one of whom is an artist and one of whom is a good writer, probably a poet or a creative writer or someone like that. Any artist and writer in class? Nobody is a good artist in this class. It's such a huge class. At least 28 people in today's class. Nobody can draw very well.
Ma'am, Nishamani Mohanto.
So why is Nishamani Mohanto not mentioning it? It's a place where you can really make a difference. And somebody who can write very well is a poet or a creative writer.
I'm Kiran Das.
So okay, so Nishamani and Kiran can do this project. One person will start drawing, make your own comics, and these kinds of comics will be relevant to Tezpur. Because once it's up on the internet, it is not always necessary that the world will come to Tezpur. Times are changing. Now the new need of the hour is for Tezpur to reach the other parts of the world. Try and see how you can reach the contexts of Tezpur, things happening around you, and take them up in open source up on the internet and reach it out to the world. Because the typical tendency of Indian scholars is to get access of the world, bring it to their home. It's also high time to take your home out to the world. One of you start drawing about issues that are relevant to Tezpur. I don't know what are issues relevant to Tezpur. It could be about weather, it could be about rhinoceros, it could be about forest conservation, it could be about rains, it could be about landslides. Start making little political commentaries, non-partisanal political commentaries which are humorous in nature. Digitize them, mark them up, create your own open source WYSIWYG editor and put it up. Let the world see that this is what the student community thinks. Many American university student groups actually are doing these kinds of things. Have you all heard of this comic strip called The Buddygator? It's about a green color alligator. You can see about the buddygator.com. Buddygator is so interesting. Actually, it's an alligator. And alligators are supposed to be hated by human beings, or disliked by human beings, because people either find them slimy or they think it's ferocious and therefore scary. But this is a lovely alligator who's full of love. He loves everybody. He's full of kindness. And he goes around spreading a lot of positivity across the world. So somebody goes to Gator and says that I am suffering from COVID. Nobody is talking to me. So I'm very alone. Gator comes and gives a big helmet kind of a mask to that person, says, wear this, then we can talk. Because it is about taking precautions. It is not about isolating human beings. So Gator comes and does amazing things of kindness. I think spread some love, spread some kindness, essentially with context from Tezpur. If you talk about universal context, it will not make your digital project any appreciable. Are you understanding what I'm saying? I think it's high time you use your photographs, your tropes, your Kaziranga forest, or whatever else there is. You will know about your localities 20 times more than I will. Use your tropes, use your contexts, use your history, and try and talk about things in graphic strips, comic strips, digitize them, use a proper markup, place it in some kind of a WYSIWYG editor and put it up on the internet. Because anyway you have a project, make it to best use. Or some of you can think about, taking help from the computer science engineering department of your university to begin with, and create a what do you call it, a GPS-based mapping device within the university. You don't have to start really big, but start creating a map of Tezpur University where every building is plotted. So if somebody, an outsider like me, goes to the university and I'm like, Acha, sorry, I'm in the biotechnology department. I had to go to SMS department. How will I go? So immediately I can check it within the app. There are so many things you can think of doing as part of creating your project of digital humanity. You don't have to do it for entire Tejpur. You don't have to do it for entire Assam, but you can do it for your university. There are many things that you can do. I will now talk also about another project called the In short, this is called the CPDL. This is the Koel Public Domain Library. Is there any musician in this class? Somebody who creates his own music, plays the guitar, creates his own, or maybe plays the piano and creates his or her own music? If there is, that person will find this particular domain very useful. It's called the CPDL. It already has an open sourced repository of typeset musical scores. So maybe you would want to play only the front end or some lead music piece and you want a background, you can take the background freely without getting involved in any copyright infringement activity. It's up in open source. You can take typeset musical scores and you can place it, superimpose it on your piece, whereas you play only the lead piece. And these are so outside the domain of copyright. So young musicians who are trying hard to make it big can, of course, use it. That way, after making such music, you can have your own YouTube channel, you can have your own Spotify. So I have taken examples of different sorts because I don't know the target group, because I don't know all of you that well. I've tried to see what different kinds of energy levels can exist in a class, and I've tried to take examples and, to give you ideas about what you can do. Okay, is there anybody who is a great, Tolkien fan, Lord of the Rings fan? We'll keep quarreling with each other about Hobbit and about other things of Tolkien, of the Lord of the Rings universe. If there is, you can think of Tolkien Gateway. This is also an open source platform in which people talk about multiple parallel universe of how otherwise Tolkien can exist beyond what has already been written. So you see, it's a very interesting thing these days. Fandom as a culture is a big thing. Have you heard of the fandom culture? Digital fandom culture is only even better because across the world, if you are a Sherlock Holmes fan, you can do so much with Sherlock Holmes that you need not comply to what Sir Arthur Conan Doyle had originally written, or the BBC Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock Holmes as the only kind of Sherlock Holmes that exists. There are in fact so many metaverses that in one metaverse, Dr. Watson is a female, is a woman who is a therapist to Sherlock Holmes, appointed by Sherlock's father. These are all fandom-based fictions. These all exist in multiverse, in parallel universe. You can also create your own parallel universe digitally and talk about it in different ways. If you are really interested, you can reach out to me. I will give you his, specially curated content from that particular area. And then, of course, there is the Wikipedia, which is the knowledge-based encyclopedia format, but in digital base. So in Wikipedia, what's interesting is we were also discussing this last day that everybody is a reader, everybody is an author, therefore everybody is a participant. In addition to which, there is also a group of moderators. Devashish was raising this question toward the end, and very interesting question that was. What happens if somebody writes something wrong? Wikipedia also has a set of moderators who ensure that there will not be any hate speech written, or if you raise a complaint that such and such was written, but then it got modified to such and such. I think Rabindranath Tagore was a great artist, was a great poet, and then somebody came in who also has the power to modify, and that person came and wrote in the same Wikipedia page that Rabindranath Tagore is one of the worst poets India has ever produced. Technically, it's possible to write this, but Wikipedia also has the group of moderators who will sit in between. These are also voluntary moderators. Most of them do not get paid. So it's all voluntary activity. If you're interested in digital humanities, you understand that knowledge is free for all. Information and knowledge is accessible by all. So it's not really about a business. It's not really about money. It's all crowdsourced. It's all pulled by everybody, contributed by everybody. They have their own expenses of hosting the servers and all, which is expensive. But for that, they also ask for donations. Sometimes when you open Wikipedia, have you noticed that they mention that Wikipedia runs on crowdsourced funds? So please be kind enough to donate some amount to Wikipedia, starting from a certain, whatever they would ask for, maybe starting from $50 or whatever. Sometimes they bring this up. So I will, after this, these are very basic examples of open source examples of the kind of possibilities that digital humanities can do in the field of humanities with the help of digital tools. I will also give you some models, but you have noticed that all of these are in fiction or non-fiction, all these examples. The examples which I just cited are all from fiction or non-fiction?
Most of them are fiction, ma'am.
No, all of these are from non-fiction. Ballot Media, it talks about voting, non-fiction. Catpedia talks about collecting memorabilia, still non-fiction. CPDL talks about using typeset musical scores, that's non-fiction. Tolkien Gateway is about how to create a multiple universe of Tolkien's works. So that discussion in itself is still non-fiction. Wikipedia, of course, is non-fiction. So apparently at this stage, most of students come asking me, are there examples of open source collaborative writing which exist also in the field of fiction? What do you think? Can it exist in fiction? Can it not exist in fiction? Any guesses? Can this model of collaborative digital writing also exist in fiction? Is that too difficult a question? It can certainly exist in fiction. And I will now give examples of, particularly this would be important for literature departments who work with fiction as much as they work with non-fiction. There could be different kinds of humanities departments, but working with non-fiction is acceptable for literature departments as well as it could be acceptable for, let's say, a psychology department, an economics department. But trying to convert fictional writing in the digital space in infinite collaboration is something that mostly only literature departments can attempt. Writing fiction is not one of the primary prerogatives of an economics department or a psychology department. That's where your department should take a lead and try and work in digitizing or creating interesting projects of digital humanities even in the field of fiction. The first example that I will give here is called Galaxy Key. Galaxy Key is a web-based free content virtual community which talks about fictional galaxies, and in which they also create two-dimensional maps of different kinds of galaxies. It's kind of a game, and it's also a fictional game. So these days you play so many games which have an inherent story in them. The game advances on the basis of a fictional narrative in which you clear every problem that is in one galaxy, and you also have to take your stance in deciding which part of the story you will take. Remember, I was mentioning about the Hardy Boys Nancy Drew story, I think yesterday or day before. It's something like that. So you are in a galaxy, there are 20 problems that has been given to you from that galaxy. It's not that you have to clear all 20. You can choose which path you will take. Accordingly, if you have taken the right path in the narrative and have also played the game well, then the next galaxy, which is still now locked, will open. And then you can enter the next galaxy. In the next galaxy also, there would be different kinds of projects and hurdles, handicaps in front of you, challenges in front of you. You have to take the right step in the narrative and also play the right games, which does not mean that out of 20, you have to clear all 20 steps. In fact, it's an interesting anecdote that there was such kind of a fictional game which became very famous. And it was about certain people who are entering into an American bank, and they have to kill the bankers there. The more bankers you kill, the more coins you accumulate, snatch all the money, and then run away from the bank. This is the typical game. At the end, they will try and sort it out, justify by saying that the money will go to the poor people and all that. There was this very famous game. In between, there was a particular round which said, let's say round 1, you have to break the main gate of the bank. So you break the main gate of the bank and you go to level 2. In level 2, you have to handle the security guards who, in some place, they're placed. Then you have to go to the banker and kill the 3 bankers that are there. Then you have to go to the bank manager and kill the bank manager. The more people in the bank you kill, the more points you accumulate. Therefore, you get more money. In the end, you have to come out without yourself getting injured or killed. It's an anti-game. It's a game in which the killer, the bad person, is the protagonist. Now, they had introduced one bonus round in between. That bonus round was something like that in this round, if you cannot kill the bankers, you have to start shooting the people who have visited the bank for getting their own banking purposes done. That's a bonus round. You have to kill all the civil people that are there, and then maybe the banker will get scared and come in front of you. Then you have to kill the banker. Do you know what gamers across the world did? How did gamers across the world play this particular bonus round in which you had to kill civil people who went to the bank, but they were not bankers themselves? They went for taking services like us, normal people who visit banks. What did gamers across, these are all real-time games, so you can chat, you can talk, but this already you already know about PUBG, in which people can chat and talk real-time while playing the game. This was also a real-time game. What did the gamers do? How did they solve this round? Any clue? If you were in that place, if you were a gamer, how would you play this round of killing common people and acquiring more marks, points? How would you play this round? There's no correct answer to this. I'm just asking how you would have played this round of the game. No clue? Nayan, how would you have played this round?
Ma'am?
How would you play this round of killing common people in the bank who are not bankers? Something remarkable happened because it was a real-time game in which people could chat and talk to themselves. All the gamers decided that, see, if I start shooting, I get more points. And if you don't shoot as much, you don't get points. All the gamers summarily decided that, no, this is not a round we will play. In our game, if the rationale is to kill bankers, take money and give it to the poor, it does not involve, even philosophically at a virtual game level, at no point does it involve killing common people. So nobody should kill a commoner. And nobody played that bonus round. Eventually, the round was dropped from the game. That is the kind of impact that you can create digitally if you're playing together. And it's not as if you know who's playing with you. Everybody's playing anonymously. But you can still create these kinds of digital pressures in which game makers will start designing their games in different ways. And please understand that games is not the only thing which you find in your white web. There are so many other games which also exist in the dark web. For instance, we heard about Blue Whale. Have you heard about Blue Whale? The game that got banned from India. These were all games which were being played in the dark web. So even in the dark web, people, while collaborating with each other, decided that, no, this goes against the policy of our gaming. We cannot kill the common people. So nobody should kill any common person. If anybody kills, then that person would get a point and I would not get a point. Then that person would win and I would lose. So let's nobody kill any common person. And people maintained that. It's not as if Tuja Bharme, it's my game, I have to play and win. It's not like that. Everybody philosophically agreed to the position that they will not play the game. And eventually that particular round was dropped from the game. These are different digital projects where you can even anonymously from across the world make a huge difference. So Galaxy Key is one of such games in which, some activity, some gaming activity goes hand in hand with a fictional narrative. Do you have any question as of now? I'm going on passionately giving more and more examples. Please ask if you have questions.
Ma'am,
Mm-hmm.
can you explain more about the game Blue Whale? Because almost 4 or 5 years ago, it was like media sensation at that
Correct.
time.
I have not played Blue Whale. Even I have read about Blue Whale. From what I understood, that this was a game in the dark web, where of course they had a fictional narrative going on with activities. It was apparently to scare somebody off, and people started applying different prototypes of scaring others. In which, in the end, people realized that these 10 things will essentially scare people off. And in the kind of analytics that they did, one of the topmost scaring things still came out as blackmail. So if you do not do this activity, if you do not go and steal from that house, we already know your address, we go and kill your mother. So blackmail still featured as one of the foremost areas of getting scared. In the end, apparently, you try and push the person towards more and more scaring activities, which depends. There is no common rule. Because it's all fictional narratives, the start, the middle, and the end is not common for everyone. It is different based on how you react. But the point is, in the end, if you happen to survive all fear sensations, if you do not get feared, then from a participant of the game, you also become a moderator. It means you're some kind of a champion who does not get scared easily. So then you start scaring others. You become part of the core team of coordinators who do Blue Whale unto others. But the sensation happened because in this particular case, which the media covered extensively, this young boy at one of the senior levels of the game, at one of the later levels of the game, was asked to commit suicide. And basing on blackmailing, the guy was not very aged. I forgot the age of the guy. It was in dark web. I did not even play the game, so I don't know. So the guy was not an adult also, I think, from what I faintly remember. I think maybe he was, below 18 and young or middle level adolescent who actually got scared because, people in the dark web can hack your details and they actually can get your residential address. It's not a big thing for them. So the guy was scared of saying that they will hurt their family members and all, so he actually committed suicide, which is when the whole thing became a media sensation. So the real question more than getting scared, playing Blue Whale and all is how such a young guy got access to the dark web. I am more intrigued about that part. Now, if I openly start scaring somebody, if I start showing a gun in front of a student and say, you have to raise your hands up, surrender to me, and then go sit there. This way, people will do things in a certain way. But how did a young adolescent guy gain access to dark web and begin to play Blue Whale? That is the part that intrigued me. I don't know the answer. Anything else?
Again, you have mentioned that Blue Whale was banned by government of India.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask that, is it really government can control the dark web as well?
No. The answer is yes and no. At one level, the government can keep a vigil on whether in the dark web the game is still being operated. And that is because police actually have access to dark web. If there's some crime happening in dark web, and if the police wants to take it up, the police can take it up. There are extensively trained and skilled cybercrime experts who work for the police department. But the other side is also true, that they will keep changing routes and they will keep changing IPs, and it's a constant police and thief kind of a chase. Things that Dhoom 1, Dhoom 2, Dhoom 3 are made of. General chase sequence between a good cop and a criminal. So that will go. The answer is yes and no. At one level, under the name Blue Whale, operating from an IP in India, it might get banned. But you don't know that it will start getting operated as Black Orange from tomorrow, from a different IP. It's difficult. It's a constant cat and bull chase. Okay, one of the next examples that I have is an application called Folding Story. Folding Story is also very important, and I think I am personally very excited by Folding Story because it's a writing game. It's a writing game where each writer writes only one line of the story or 120 words, whichever is lesser, and another anonymous writer writes the next line, and it moves so on. Thereby, you actually end up creating a novel. This started by a project called collaborators.com, but collaborators gradually stopped for different reasons. When collaborators was in place, even I had a few lines in collaborators. But Folding Story is like that. It's a fictional novel. It is written anonymously by an entirely anonymous, writers across the world. Nobody knows who's writing which line. Somebody is anonymously writing one line, then the next person's taking from there and writing the next line, the third person's writing from the other line. So one thing which people will do in such kinds of projects is, one, you have to understand that if you like this project, it is then that you participate in this project. And there is a huge lot of responsibility and trust that you need to have towards each other. If you are entering into the Folding Story project because you want to ruin somebody else's work, or the novel is actually going great, but you intentionally write a line and then you spoil the entire narrative, that's technically not why this project was made. You can still do it. You can still spoil something that has been so beautifully created. But it's also to sensitize the human generation that the whole point is not about ruining beautiful things. The whole point is about advancing a beautiful line with another beautiful line. So what exists also is a philosophy of love and a philosophy of trust in such kinds of projects, which is also how verbatim licenses in open source works. In open source, you can freely reproduce anybody else's work, provided you acknowledge that it has been taken from whom. You do not have to pay any money because you're using somebody else's work. But even in that, you have to create a verbatim line, which means you cannot tamper with the line. That line will remain constant, that this has been taken from such and such person's work on such and such date, and I duly acknowledge that that person is the sole author. If there's no love and no trust in open source, then the point gets defeated. Then you'd rather be a part of copyrighted material. Then you'd rather be a part of a discriminatory world where she gets access and she does not get access, where the rich gets access and the poor does not get access, where people in power get access and powerless does not get access. Then you'd rather be a part of that world. If everything that you have in your hand is about ruining a project. But if you believe in equality, if you believe in the beauty of universal access and freedom of expressions, then let us come together and say, create a story as part of the Folding Story. I have other examples also. I will quickly mention all these stories. There are Fickly and Fabulate. I will not mention Collaborators because Collaborators has stopped existing. Collaborators was an extremely interesting project till some point of time. Just give me a second. I have mentioned quite a few examples. All these examples are in open source, digital infinite collaborative writing, in which you can create fiction. Unlike the earlier examples of nonfiction, here you can write stories, novels, maybe even poems. You can draw a thing. You can do things in fiction. Fickly, Fabulate, 1 Million Monkeys Typing, Story Mash, Novelet. These are extremely interesting projects. This is also another project which you can think of doing. You can create some kind of a WYSIWYG editor, base it on Wiki because it's easier for you. At your level, if you don't know computer programming, you won't be able to do a whole lot with the programming bit. But create some kind of a Wiki page and have your own usernames, beautiful, funny usernames, and do some kind of a Twitterature. Twitterature is a real thing, Twitter literature. So that's because, it's like 120 characters. In 120 characters, each person writes one line, the other person writes one line, and the third person writes another line, and see if you can end up creating a story. Or see how the other person, who's also from your same background, same age, thinks about a narrative. These are amazing examples of testing your own ground and testing the situatedness of the ground on which you stand. So there are problems with these projects also, and with the problems of these projects is the last thing I will mention today. So for digital collaborative text, as contrasted to more conventional studies in the humanities, the process of theorization of a context does not happen. So in a traditional novel, in a traditional story, how does it work? You have a context based on which an author chooses to write a text. After the text, if you gain anything more out of it, you call it a supplement. In a digital collaborative infinite kind of writing, because it's creating every moment and it's changing and creating itself again, you do not have a context. So in this kind of writing, it's a major shift from more traditional forms of fiction writing, because now for a fiction, there's nothing called a context anymore. So if there's no context, you do not have reference to context. So also with hyperlinking, because things constantly keep getting changed from one status to the very next status, there will be a level of uncertainty. No matter how much we talk to people about love and about equality and about freedom, there will be some people who will keep acting the black sheep of the family, of the digital community. Now, what do we do with such kinds of people? One could think of moderating it, one could think of removing it altogether, one could think of keeping it and showing the world that, look, even after trying so much, some people will still do this. You could even think of doing that. It's up to you. It's upon how you decide to do that. But that level of uncertainty will remain. That is the point that I am trying to raise. And maybe it's high time to understand that fragment, uncertainty, non-cohesiveness, these are not bad things in a narrative. With the new platform, maybe these actually are new challenges. Earlier, what would we say if we did a traditional piece of literature? We would say, this author does not write well because it's not cohesive. There's no link from chapter 1 to chapter 2. The writer writes arbitrarily, randomly. These used to be criticisms. But in digital collaborative infinite writing, these are not criticisms anymore. These are the beautiful things that exist in such kinds of writing. That it's not cohesive. We do not want it to make cohesive. The world is not cohesive. All writers of the world are not cohesive. People are writing from different backgrounds, that will show. And together we're trying to create some kind of a chaos. But chaos is not essentially bad. Because till the previous generation, whoever were not doing digital humanities, people would constantly keep thinking that this is very chaotic. And when we express in English and say this is very chaotic, do we mean good about it or do we mean bad about it? When we say this is very chaotic, or when a teacher comes to the class and says, why is there so much of chaos in the class? Do we use the word chaos in a positive way or a negative way? Yes, anybody?
Negative way, ma'am.
Certainly. We always use the word chaos in a very negative way. But maybe now, because your generation has been sensitized about love and equality and digital humanities, maybe you will gradually, may not be today, may not be tomorrow, maybe you will gradually start understanding that chaos is not a bad thing. Mathematicians have understood this way back, some decades back, because they are now evidently talking about the prominence and the effectivity of chaos theory. Butterfly effect, Lorentz attractor. I do not want to get into those details so quickly in your batch. But there are things which are happening with butterfly effect. There are things which people are talking about when they talk about chaos theory. But just at your level, in one of those initial classes of digital humanities, I think it's enough if you acknowledge chaos as beautiful. We often use certain words to mean beautiful. That person is very sorted in the head. Therefore, that person is good. It does not have to happen that way. Some person can be very clumsy and cluttered and still produce great art, still produce amazing poetry. Because cohesiveness is not necessarily a virtue in the digital medium. It was a virtue in the print medium because the print medium was static. And in a static space, the more you are static, you are in line with the methods and materials. But for a medium, a method and material which is not static, which is constantly moving, then as an author, being static is not a particularly thing to be valued. It's not a great thing. It's okay to be chaotic. It's okay to be not cohesive. It's okay to be fragmented. On Monday, I will talk about something called the Ouroboros snake model. I do not want to enter into that today because I have to talk about some power theory of fiction writing and other kinds of artistic productions. Does this class know about Michel Foucault? I will prepare my lecture for Monday based on my understanding of the response now. Have you read Foucault and Rollabar? What is
Yes.
an author? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Death of the author, birth of a reader. You all know about all these, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Ah, great. Okay. So then I will prepare my lecture accordingly. So we're now in the last 10 minutes for if you have any questions, comments. Ask anything. You people are not thinking of, weird questions.
Ma'am,
Okay, too many people started asking together. Can you go? Okay, can Biju Muni start asking? Biju Muni? Sorry, I can't hear you. Biju Muni, can you type your question in the chat box? Okay, meanwhile, can Nayan ask the question?
Ma'am, actually, I want to know that Ola, Uber, Rapido, that kind of things, where they include like.
That is basic GPS tracking. So it's basically about a digital map. With the digital map, you also insert the phone numbers of the drivers and of the calling party, and then you just connect it. But the digital challenge of that is to create a coordinated digital map of the city in which they will operate. At one end of that map, you insert the phone number of the driver. At other end of the map, you also insert the phone number of the customer, the passenger, whatever name you give them. And then you connect these two bits. But connecting is another thing. That's about connectivity. The digital challenge is to create the GPS-enabled map, which isn't actually a challenge, which has become very easy because Google has already given a free map for everybody to use. Oh, it's not dark wave beta, it's dark web. Wait. This is Biju Muni's answer. It's not dark web. Dark web is the web to which you should not enter. It's that route of the internet which technically gentlemen and nice human beings don't enter. Apparently criminal activities happen there, starting from uploading inappropriate videos to giving supari to killers to kill somebody in real life. All kinds of bad things happen in dark web. Dark web basically means everything that happens in the web, in the white web, can also happen in the dark web, but of a criminal variety. The potential of the internet remains the same in both white and dark web, but in the dark web is used because you can create proxy servers and you can create virtual processing networks, and therefore your IP can be hidden. So the police or any government official cannot immediately track you. So you can use it for illegal activities. Also, you do not have to know about the dark web, forget it. Okay, then over to you, Dr. Nyog. So you are on mute.
Thank you, Dr. Mitra. Thank you. It was a great session. And মই আমাৰ ষ্টুডেন্ট কিনিকো ধন্যবাদ দিছো তোমালোকে ভালকে ইন্টাৰেক্ট কৰা আৰু যদি তোমালোকৰ কিবা কোৱেশ্চন থাকে তেতিয়া হলে মেমক লাষ্ট সোমবাৰে তোমালোকে সুধিবা okay then we will meet you on Monday. Okay,
Monday 11 o'clock, same link. Okay. Thank you
so much.
All of you. Okay. Oh, happy Vasant Panchami to all of you. See you on Monday.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. You see the same.